Hello, hello. Welcome to Healthy Perspectives, a podcast that takes on current cultural and social issues through a clinical lens. Hello, hello. All right. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us. As many of you know, we've been doing this for a while, but we have gotten some new followers. So those of you who have been joining us recently, thank you so much. Look, we're trying to make a difference here at Healthy Perspectives and just offer what we call healthy perspective, a different vantage point to look at problems that exist culturally, socially, and psychologically around us on a daily basis. And we always try to pick things that are current, relevant, and hopefully interesting, but not just today, but for a long time, right? Think about this. If you could go back and listen to my earliest podcasts, the ones near the beginning, maybe a couple of years ago, and you were to listen to them today, I want there to be relevance in the now, in the here and the now, like with what we are encountering today. Can that podcast from 2 years ago make us better people today? And today's topic is one that's a little bit different than we have done. I'm using something that's very local right now, but I could imagine it being something that would come up in a lot of places. Our nearest city is only about an hour and a half away. Now, I'm very fortunate in many ways. I live in a relatively small town. It's actually, for me, it's a really small town because I grew up in much larger places. That being said, this is a big city issue that happens a lot. And I want to address it directly, and that is homelessness. There is an ordinance going into effect in this nearby big city that, and it's really a smaller big city, but they still have big city issues. In this big city, what they are doing is changing some of the ordinances to redefine the safety corridors. Meaning they want people to be able to walk the streets day and night and be safe doing it. Well, most homeless people are pretty harmless. Let's be real. Like that has been my experience historically, but not always. And homeless encampments are, generally speaking, filthy areas. And that, if you don't like that reality, I don't know, go explore one and come back and talk to me. But we want to take a look at this. I'm going to paint you some scenarios. And what I want to do is two things. I want to take a look at humanity versus heartlessness. Are we being humane or heartless? All right. And I want to take a look at healthy and unhealthy, because those two very different scales that we would use to assess a scenario may give us some very different results. This is a practice of empathy, a lot like, for those of you who've been with me a long time and you go way back, our You're the Problem episodes, where we empathize, where we say, can we empathize and still create structure that allows us to have a more reasonable environment? And I think most of the time we can. And sometimes we have to lean one direction or the other and say, look, even though my empathetic self wants to solve this in a way that is the most humane possible, there's this other side where, you know what? It's just a safety problem. You're just going to have to suck it up and deal with it. I know that sucks, but you got to do it. So suck it up and do something different. And that's really hard when we're talking about this population of homeless people. Some choose to be homeless. That's a fact. If you don't know that, go interview some homeless people. They're very interesting in terms of their life experience. Some would never choose that life if they could choose something else. And some of you out there are like, but it comes from choices they've made. In a lot of cases, that's true. Their decisions may have put them in that situation, but that doesn't mean they chose homelessness. Okay. I once, a couple of years ago was, I sometimes will go and, uh, I work with I volunteer with a homeless shelter. And, I was sitting with this guy, and this guy, so interesting. He had a professional job at one point, just a couple of years before this. Uh, he he got diagnosed with a pretty severe and aggressive form of cancer and started getting medical treatment. In the meantime, he ended up losing his job, and I don't remember all of the details as to why, but once his health care was gone, or he maximized his health care, I don't recall exactly. What ended up happening though was he then mortgaged his home to pay for medical care, but then he couldn't pay the bill. And one thing led to another, and this snowball effect. And this guy ended up being homeless. Super bright, super smart, not drug addicted, not any of these other more typical versions of how people end up homeless. And again, that's a generalization. I know there are exceptions to every one of these, but this guy ended up homeless, and I got to sit down and have lunch with him one day and hear his story, and it was super interesting. And so, look, you have all these perceptions of what it means to be homeless. Um, we're not gonna necessarily tear all those perceptions down, but I wanted to paint a picture of the humane part of the problem of homelessness. Okay. There is real human people who are just struggling with addiction, struggling with financial situations, struggling with abuse, and had to leave and found themselves shortly after being homeless with a kid. Like these are real life stories that I have personally encountered. But let me paint you a picture. We're going to play the little humane or heartless versus healthy or unhealthy. So let's go. We have a scenario. The city sanitation crew is scheduled to clear a homeless encampment because it has become unsafe. It's become a sanitary and a fire hazard. And so they head on in. Let's say the humane thing to do. As they come in, what should they do from a humane or heartless perspective? The heartless thing to do would be to come in and just start ripping up people's, think about this. This is the empathy part, homes. I know you're like, but that's not their home. It is to them. So the humane response is to treat it like it's a person's home. Well, what are you going to do when you're telling somebody to leave their home? That's a really hard position to be in. But you also have to measure the health and unhealthiness. You can't just have this fire hazard, sanitation issue, like fecal matter all over the place. Like that's no good either. So we end up with this friction point where, in order to go in, like these people are literally probably putting their lives at risk with the sanitation issues. Like they got to be gloved up, they got to be masked up. Not only that, but they're entering what other people perceive to be their home, which means you could have an emotional issue where somebody's like, don't touch my stuff, because that happens. That happens. I've literally said hi to somebody and they're like, you don't look at my stuff. And I get it. If that's all they have in the world, to them, it has value. So how are we going to navigate this? This friction point is not unusual. And this is about to happen in this town close by. They're going to be asking people to move. Hopefully, they're asking, saying, hey, like, we're going to need you to move. Can you kind of go over here and have a place for them to go? but they might not have a place for them to go. They might be in a situation where they just say, I don't know where you can go, but here is not it. I hope they arm them better than that. Teaching them how to get to the shelter, what kind of resources are available at the shelter, stuff like that. But they may not. And you're talking about workers just doing the work. They may not actually know, other than I'm going into this zone and I've got to be prepared to clean it up after these people are moved out. Or the officers that go in and like, hey, you guys got to go. Ladies and gentlemen, time to go to a new home. You are migrating and you didn't even want to. Not only that, but let's add this to the equation. The end of October. It is cold. Last night it froze. And they're going to be asked to move. I mean, they might have found their little warm spot, their little cozy spot, and now they're going to be told, you got to go. Humane or heartless if you have to tell them to go. It's not the person's fault that's telling them. Is it humane or heartless to enact an ordinance that says, we need to clean this up? No, there's nothing heartless about that. For everybody else, because you got to empathize with both sides of this. The homeless people, all the sides of it. The homeless people, the officers, the cleaning crew, the citizens who want to just walk the streets of their town or city. And there's a lot of components there. All right. Scenario number 2. A homeless shelter institutes a metal detector and strict bag search after repeated incidents of violence. Okay. This can happen. What is the humane or heartless aspect of this? Well, you put up the metal detectors and you don't tell them anything about it. They come in, you grab their bag and say, we have to search this. Seems pretty heartless, but it is healthy. It's going to improve health and safety. So then what do? Like, humanity would say, like, you would notify them that this is coming, if possible. But what if that encourages them to hide things inside? So maybe you can't do that. What if on the way in, they say, hey, we have a new policy. And what we end up with in a situation like that is the person is like, well, I'm going to go stash my stuff and come back. But a lot of shelters have timelines. You have to be in the door by a certain timeline or you don't get a bed. And what if they knew the timeline, they were respecting the timeline, and they came in 5 to 10 minutes early, and they're checking in and they find out, holy smokes, the rules have just changed. And they want to go stash their stuff, but if they leave to go stash their stuff, then they're not going to get in before the timeline. Folks, this is not easy. I'm actually having I do this stuff for a living. And my mind is going, oh my gosh, what did I jump into? The healthy thing to do is to set the expectations and hold the expectations. That's true. You got to create safety. I mean, these people are going to come in and they're going to try to get some sleep. They got to be able to feel safe getting some sleep, because the only way out of this situation is for them to get proper sleep, eat right, get some appropriate, healthy, showers, shaves if they can, like do the normal stuff that helps us stay healthier. And at the same time, you got to have boundaries. You got to have these expectations that are met. And when they're not, what are you going to do? Wow. All right. We're going to I'm going to skip down. A homeless man begins sleeping, or woman begins sleeping on a bench near a children's playground. What do we do with that? I mean, this is a relatively common occurrence in any significantly large city. What do you do? You're like, hey, uh, guys, you got to go. I mean, or what most people would probably actually do is call the police, and then the police have to come. So, what we are doing in a scenario, let's say we called the police and the police show up, because really that is their role, right? Create safety. Here's what we're doing, though. And maybe you thought this through, maybe you haven't. But what we are doing in that moment is we are setting the police officer and the homeless person to have more disagreements. Think about that. We want the homeless people to listen to the police officers who are trying to create communal safety. But every time we, like, metaphorically sick the cops on the homeless guy, the more humane approach, if possible, if safe to do so, would be to approach the homeless person on your own and say, hey, look, we got kids around here. I know you're struggling, but if you could head on out so that they could partake in this space, that would be great. Because this is a park, not a campground. Right? Clarify what it is. Like, and they'll often be like, well, I have as much right to be here as you, or maybe they'll just say, okay, yeah. I would say 9 times out of 10, they're probably just going to say, yeah, well, I'll move on. But that 1 time out of 10, they're like, I have as much right to be here as you do. Then the truth is that's kind of right. And that's kind of not, right? When you're at a playground, you're there to play. And a bench is made for sitting. And we start thinking about the outline as it is, the way it's designed. And we use a bench generally to sit, not sleep. Now, do people fall asleep on benches? Oh, yeah, that happens all the time. And is there a difference between somebody falling asleep on a bench and somebody sleeping on a bench? Yes, there's a big difference. And if you can't see that, you probably better check yourself a little bit, because the humane thing to do when somebody falls asleep on a bench is to leave them alone. But when somebody is sleeping on the bench, it's time to move them along. Those are like, those are humane responses. One thing is not the same as the other. And healthy and unhealthy is kids. Look, I don't want kids to be afraid of homeless people, because generally speaking, like I said earlier, they're not dangerous. But there are exceptions to that. A kid should be conscientious, should be aware of the homeless person. And if they're acting erratic, then there's a problem going on. No different than anybody else. That's a humane way of looking at that. That human being that's acting erratic and looks dressed nice and everything, they're still erratic, right? We want the kids to be able to discern those two things. And when somebody goes over and says, hey, could you move it along, or at least sit up and use the bench appropriately so that others can partake in sitting on the bench if they want to sit here, we might close some gaps and have more conversations, which wouldn't be a bad thing. It would be a humane thing. It's treating them as they are, which is as a person. But we also have to be aware of healthy versus unhealthy. And sleeping on that bench is not the healthiest thing. It might have been the healthiest thing for them overnight. I don't know. But in the morning, it's no longer the healthiest thing. Okay. One more scenario for you. I'm going to give you this one. A passerby finds a homeless person unconscious. Think about this. What do you do? What do you do? The humane thing to do is ask them if they need help. But that might also be the most unhealthy thing you can do, potentially. You go to shake them a little bit to check their to see if they're going to come to, and you give them a little nudge, and all of a sudden, like this could literally happen with a lot of homeless people. This is not like a small percentage. Uh, you go to shake them and you get pricked with a needle. That could change your life forever. But you also want to be humane. See that friction point? What do you do? How do you handle that? Do you call the professionals? Maybe they need help before the professionals would get there. And then that also puts other people in danger. And yes, they might be trained and more prepared and they do this, but like, what do you do? I mean, it's kind of heartless to just walk right on by, which is, I think, what a lot of people would do. And you might be one of them. You might be like, not my circus, not my clowns. Can't do anything. Sorry. Not putting myself at risk. Folks, these friction points are real. We have to look at ways to balance humanity and health. And if I'm being really honest right now in our current culture, I don't know that we do a very good job. Frankly, a lot of times we do a really terrible job. We don't even see the people suffering half the time, or we don't see them as people. And if we do, we don't see our influence, our ability to be helpful. Altruism. Folks, you've heard me talk about this before. What do I do when somebody else needs me and I could help? If I choose not to help, I have to live with that. And most of y'all are like way too comfortable, and I'm going to come at you kind of hard. So hopefully it doesn't hurt too much. Most of you are way too comfortable pretending you never saw what you saw. And that's not okay. If you're one of those, look, I'm talking to you and I'm coming from a place of care for you. If you're one of those who can walk right by a homeless person or right by an addict shooting up and not feel for them, hurt for them, there's something wrong with you. You're losing your humanity. And I would say it's time for you to get uncomfortable, to do something that's hard, and to remember that every person matters, all of them. Every kid, maybe the hardest ones, the teenagers, every homeless person. And there's another angle to this I'm going to dive into just for a second. The extremely wealthy, they are just people too. For those of you who think that why would my opinion even matter to somebody like, I don't know, Elon Musk or, whatever. I mean, pick your super wealthy person. Why would Jeff Bezos care what I think? If I think he's a jerk, who cares? They're people. They are people. And you have a choice. You can treat them humanely or heartlessly. And every social media post you put out there has that option. When you call somebody an idiot, or much worse, because I see lots of worse things out there, that's a choice you're making. You are going down the path of heartless instead of humane. And that goes if you're the protester or the protesters of the protesters. That goes if you're on the right side of the equation or the wrong side of the equation. Humanity is getting lost, and we're justifying it because we're saying it's for the greater good. It's going to be healthier. I think you can do both most of the time. I think you can do both things. You can be humane and healthy. It just takes more work, more creativity. And frankly, a lot of you are too damn lazy to do it. And I get it. I do. I don't always want to do the help that I do. Most of the time I do. But there are days where I don't. And I still got to show up. Because when things are hard, but right, we have to make that choice. And do the right. Even though it's hard. This was inspired by something local, but my guess is most of y'all have experienced this kind of a thing. I hope this was helpful at increasing empathy, improving our look at humanity instead of heartlessness, finding that balance point between health and humane, and wherever possible, try to get them both, folks, even if it takes a lot more work. I hope this was helpful. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. We appreciate our audience a lot, so we give you some simple ways to track us down. Please like, subscribe, and follow all the podcasts on different platforms, but you can also email us at healthyperspectives@protonmail.com, or you can check out our website at healthy-perspectives.com/podcast. It's a backward slash. So if you want to go to our landing page, if you go to healthy-perspectives.com, you'll still find us. You just got to click on the podcast button. Thank you so much.